podcast where I'm trying hard to suck less at hosting Merfolk podcasts, and you're learning from my mistakes. My name is Matt, and you can find me on Twitter at Matthew Caudilli. We also have my co-host Cody. How are you doing tonight, Cody?
I'm doing good, Matt. How are you doing?
I am doing great.
And you can find me on Twitter as @NotCodySmith.
I don't think people care where you are.
That's fair. That's a fair assessment.
Yeah. So, we've heard lots of complaints that Cody talks entirely way too much. So, I have hijacked the podcast, and I am going to be main host tonight.
It's true.
Actually, what really happened was last week, that we were normally record on Mondays, and I actually ended up working from about 5 a.m. till about 10 p.m. at night that Monday. So I had to cancel on Jay. Again, thank you, Jay, for coming on last week.
Yes, thank you so much for coming on. Yeah, Jay. Give it up for Jay.
So I had to cancel on Cody and Jay on Monday. So we recorded on Tuesday. So I came on and I was so exhausted from getting my work done that I joke around that I'm not prepared, but I was super unprepared last week. And then after, I don't think you guys really could tell that much. Maybe you can. I don't really care. Anyway, my wife just kind of browbeat me about not taking this seriously because Cody takes it seriously and made me feel really guilty. So I actually put in effort this week.
Yes. It also didn't help that I had the notes all super disjointed. Like I had put like Jay's questions in, and then I kind of just put my talking points, and I was like, at the beginning I was like, okay, everybody, we're just gonna kind of like zigzag them in, and then we just didn't.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't even know because I didn't read the notes once last week. Didn't have time.
You did read them before the show.
I peruse them.
Yes.
But this week I'm prepared to get through that opening. It only took me 3 tries. So I think we're ready to go.
Well, they only heard one, so you could have said that it took you no tries and you did it right on the first time.
I refuse to lie to the people.
You tell me to lie all the time.
Well, maybe I just lied about lying to the people.
Touché.
So,
do we have a Patreon?
Yeah, let's talk about Patreon. You guys should help us out on Patreon because we need money to feed our goldfish. And I believe Cody, you said that we might be getting some new art if we can get some euros, correct?
Yeah, so we are working with a great artist on Twitter. He's at Ishton. You can find his stuff. He has great little Merfolk art. I think it's amazing. And we're working with this artist, and we need to raise some money. So help us out on Patreon so we can hit our goal. And we will be able to, have some sweet new art and a new layout for our videos stuffs. And yeah, that'd be super cool if we could get there.
So maybe we'll do a tiered thing where if we can raise enough money, Cody will play a stream in a Little Mermaid costume. Or we can have Cody dress up like other things in stream. Well, let's let you guys' creative juices flow and see how much we can humiliate Cody on air.
Yes, let's do that.
He seems so excited about this. Oh, another thing, if you guys could help us out, if you could go on and rate us on your podcast devices or on your iTunes or on anywhere where you can be rated, that'd be fantastic because we got our first rating.
Review and rating. They're separate but equal. But reviews are better.
So we got a rating and a review on iTunes that states, I don't care if you love or hate fish. This is an excellent podcast. 2 knowledgeable buddies sharing their enthusiasm for fish and magic in general. In all formats. Definitely worth a listen. Now, I think this guy might be drinking a little bit because...
I think it's a lady.
Ooh.
Viola Class Lass is the username.
Man, I said I was prepared, but I totally did not read that. Well, Viola, I appreciate it. We try our best. We try to be a little goofy, little hand in foot and mouth, whatever the word is. But
What's
we we
funny?
we,
What's
we do
funny?
try.
What's funny is I told my wife that we got a rating, and she was like, "Oh, that's nice." I said it was from a lady, and she was like, "Was it Jay?" And I was like, "No, it was some other ladies. There are other ladies that play Magic."
Okay, and I'm being dead serious right now. So Cody texts me on Thursday or Wednesday, whenever we got the rating, and he's like, "Hey Matt, we finally got our first rating," and I'm like, "It was probably Jay, wasn't it?"
Well, also the rating was on Tuesday. If you read the note, you would see that it says Tuesday on the note.
So, in all fairness, I read everything that you wrote. So anyway, should we move on so it doesn't look like I'm as unprepared as I think I am?
Yes, let's continue.
All right. Are we gonna do a random Merfolk?
We're what kind of show would we be running if we did not do a random Merfolk?
Let's do a random Merfolk. So, Cody went online on that Twitter thing, and he asked our followers, the best followers on the Twitter, for a random number. And a great follower, ULM Weatherman, chose the number 17. So, like a good co-host or main host today, I followed up on Twitter and I said, ULM Weatherman, what's up with the number 17? Why'd you pick this number? And he said, well, ULM Weatherman stands for University of Louisiana Monroe Weatherman, where I got my meteorology degree. And I graduated in 1917. I'm the first 101-year-old weatherman to listen to a Merfolk podcast. And I said, dude, that's really impressive. I'm glad you're not dead, and that you still love meteorology and Merfolk.
That's a lot of M's.
I can handle the M's.
A man merrily mastered meteorology and Merfolk, modernly, masterfully playing modern
At Louisiana Monroe.
At Louisiana Monroe. That's, oh geez, that yeah. I do appreciate you phoning this one in though. That's really great that we got your response so quick.
So, the Merfolk that was randomly chosen by our first 101-year-old weatherman viewer one day maybe, is Mero Wit Snipper. Did I pronounce that correctly?
I think it's Sniper, because he's got like a little blow dart gun in the art.
Yeah, he does have a little blow dart gun. I like Wit Snipper better. It sounds more fun.
That's fine. It's fantasy, so we can make it we can make it whatever you want it to be.
No, you know why it's fine? Because this card is garbage, and the fact that his name is being mispronounced by me pretty badly is probably the most interesting thing about this card. Cody, can you tell us what it does?
Mero Wit Snipper costs blue for a creature Merfolk rogue. I will pronounce a card correctly one of these days.
This is impressive. We're off to an awful start.
Mero Wit Snipper is a Merfolk rogue for blue, and I believe that's Eventide. No,
it's
Morningtide.
Morningtide.
Yeah, Morningtide was the sun.
Yeah,
that was my bad.
I've never actually called it by Morningtide. Another morning something that's inappropriate for our podcast is what I've always called it. So
yeah.
Thank you for that.
So it is a 1/1, and when Mero Wit Sniper comes into play, target player puts the top card of his or her library into his or her graveyard. It's one card. One card.
So it's like the worst mill card ever made.
Well, I think there's probably an infinite combo here. So if you use Revelark and Restoration Angel, no, and a sack outlet, no.
Yeah.
Maybe I don't know. I don't know what I'm talking about.
You need this Revelark, a sack outlet, and the that angel with Echo that comes into play and returns a creature with converted mana cost 3 or less to the battlefield.
Karmic Guide.
Karmic Guide. That's it.
Yeah, I just thought of it. I had the art in my head,
See, this is how awful this card is. We've just gotten completely off subject.
Yeah, I think we
There's a
should just.
perfectly cute in the art, though.
Yeah, no, and like actually, I have it right here. I'm currently reading Lorwyn, the novel, and I have all of them. So like I'm in the process of reading the first one. I'm gonna read through all of them. So like the art is super cool, just like because like that's how I envision what I'm seeing in my head when I'm reading it. I see that type of art. So I love seeing all the cards. They all have great art on them, but again, like you said, it's not worth the paper it's printed on.
No, it's this toddler fodder. Now, I do
Definitely.
kind of want to make that infinite combo, though, just to say that I did it.
If you do Bant Merfolk for commander, then you could totally do it. You could have this mill combo and nobody would see it coming.
It might be worth it.
You're like Mero Wit Snipper, and they're like, sure.
No, they're gonna be like, no, it's Mero Wit Snipper.
Yeah. And then you're like, yeah, okay, for that snappy comeback, you mill the top card of your library. And then you go like Karmic Guide, just mill everyone to oblivion.
Karmic Guide, Phyrexian Altar,
Yeah.
Revlark.
Yep. Nope. You got it.
It's so unnecessarily complicated.
It's terrible, but that's what we're here for.
Exactly. So, should we move on to the main topic?
I think we should. I think we should have like 2 minutes ago.
Oh yeah. No, we're gonna do a lot of editing in this video. So,
You mean I'm gonna do a lot of editing in this video?
yeah, I don't do jack crap.
It's okay. You're here for the professional knowledge base that we all have come to know and love you for.
Exactly. I know what set symbols are.
That's what we have you here for. That's it. Set symbols and that alone.
Exactly. So, one of the things we wanted to do was we wanted to talk more legacy. Because I think we've only hit it once in our last 11 episodes. This is our 12th episode, I believe.
This is our 13th episode.
I am in a math job, by the way.
Yeah, you were just before we were. He was bragging to my wife about how he's a something scientist.
I'm a data scientist.
A data scientist, sure. And
But
here we
apparently
are.
I count to 13. Anyway, we've only talked legacy once. And part of the reason is that Cody I don't believe you had that much chance to play legacy Merfolk. Is that correct?
Yes. So I built it, and I've just had a lot of things come up in life. That family and being sick and different things like that. And my game store, DZ Comics, that's right. Literally, I think it's 7 minutes away from my house. They have Legacy every other weekend, so I have not had another. I've only played once, and I haven't had another chance to go back since building Merfolk.
Okay. So what we wanted to do is I'm going to interview Cody because my voice is silky smooth and I'm as charismatic as Walter Cronkite. So we want to get an idea from Cody about the legacy meta in general for somebody who's fairly new at it. So sit back, relax, enjoy the beautifulness that is my voice as I interview this legacy novice. So Cody, you are fairly new to legacy, correct?
Yes, that is definitely correct.
So, and I know you've played more than just Merfolk. But how much legacy do you think you played in your life?
Well, so I've been playing Legacy for about 6-ish months. Oh, I guess since last June. So we're approaching a year here shortly. And it's been pretty sporadic. Like I said, my store only has Legacy every other week, and then every once in a while they also have win a duel events at the store. And so the first event that I ever played, I borrowed a friend of mine, David, lent me his burn deck, and I got soundly trounced by a lot of people. And not to say that Burn is a bad deck, but they're
But it is.
just no, it's not bad.
It's pretty bad.
But when you're coming to and my first legacy event was also a win a duel. So
Oh, yeah.
it kind of like there's like a local crowd of about 10 to 12 of us that play on a more regular basis. And the win a duel, like there were probably like 25, 30 people there, because if people can win duels, they're going to show up. And so there were, let's just say, a lot more unfair decks that were a little bit hard. And it was also my first legacy tournament, so I had never, I kind of had an idea of what decks were, but I had no sense of the local meta. So I was kind of, um, up creek without a paddle, and I was just kind of playing it as I knew how to. And then I think I played Through the Breach, which is a game that you lose because they threw the breach Grizzlebrand, and then they draw a bunch of cards and gain a bunch of life, and then you are dead. And
Yeah, Mono Red Sneak Attack, I believe, is the deck name.
yes, so it was Sneak Attack. Um, and I think uh, I played a Storm deck that night, and I think I also played Elves, which in my defense, I should have known better because I have Pauper Elves together, and they're fairly similar decks. Basically,
Except for the one place guy is Cradle.
well, okay, sure, and Greater Hoof, but
I understand what you mean. You make a lot of elves and a lot of mana really fast.
the big thing is like, uh, it's about knowing which elves to get rid of. And Burn is really about knowing when to switch from doming them and then picking off specific elves, and whichever elf is the one that you should be getting really changes depending on what's on the board. So it's kind of it's a deck that you need to be aware of, because I would say it's pretty popular in Legacy. I'd say is elves, but it's something that you have to know what to hit.
Okay. So, and you've played another deck as well. You have two legacy decks built currently, correct?
Yes. So my other deck is Soldier Stompy, and it basically plays Chalice of the Void and Suppression Field and both Thalias. And the goal of the deck is to stop my opponent from playing things and to play Captain of the Watch, whether by hard casting it for 6 mana or or cheating it in with Preeminent Captain. And yeah, it's kind of like a Death and Taxes variant, except it just plays Soldier Tribal instead of just kind of value creatures.
Okay. So, without being Merfolk specific, what do you think about the format as a whole thus far? What are the pros and cons of Legacy?
So I think that Legacy is a great format. I think it's very detail oriented, and it's very you have to premeditate what you're doing. You have to really think about your plays. You have to sequence your plays very well, and it's one of those things that uh you know I'm sure Matt, that that people that watch Legacy oftentimes think it, and I thought this, that Legacy is like a turn 3 format.
Mm-hmm.
If that, like, like most of the time people go, oh man, I can't believe this, it's so late in the game. But really, like, Legacy isn't always like a turn 1 turn 3 format. It can go much longer than that. But
Sure. I mean, you're absolutely right. There are the turn one decks, such as Storm can turn one you, Reanimator can essentially turn one you. There's a few others that can kind of turn two you, Sneak and Show, and Mono Red Sneak Attack occasionally can do that as well. But for the most part, you're absolutely correct. Legacy is very interactive, and you really have to think about it. Your plays. Wasteland is the great equalizer.
I totally agree. And one thing that kind of, like we said, you have to think about your plays is it's really easy to look back on a game and see where you lost the game. So, um, it can be as simple as, you didn't activate Deathrite Shaman, before attacks, and that could have saved you, like gaining that life could have saved you that 2 turns ago, against burn or something like that. Like that one damage or that one life that you gained could have saved you in that. And it's one of those things that you can trace it back, because all of the turns have such huge things happening that everything is memorable.
I think a good example of this. So Cody and I actually played a round of Legacy before we recorded tonight, and I played a Sorcerer Spyglass on him, and he chose not to force a will it when he had the ability to do so, and I turned off his Mutavolts, which ultimately lost him the game.
I actually did not have Force of Will in hand. I had
You had,
I had discarded the Force of Will in favor. I'd swung with Smuggler's Copter.
oh,
Because
that's right. You could have activated them. I'm sorry.
Yeah, we were basically stalemated on board. I had a couple of 4/4s, and you had a couple Thought Knot Seers, and an endless one, I think. And basically, I activated my Smuggler's Copter with my Silvergill, and I swung, and I had Force of Will in hand. I drew for turn, so I swung and I drew Mutavault. And so basically, in my hand, I had to discard one of them, and I had Force of Will and Mutavault, and I hadn't played a land for turn. And I thought in that moment that Force of Will is dead in my hand. I can do nothing with this Force of Will. I discarded Force of Will. I played Mutavault. And I don't know if you had that Sorcerer's Spyglass in hand or not, but that was definitely good to have, because it shut me down. I couldn't block effectively.
So we talked about some of the pros. What are some of the cons of Legacy, in your opinion, so far?
Definitely cost. I've had the benefit of finding decks that fit my play style. I mean, Merfolk, obviously, because it's Merfolk, but even with the mono white soldiers list, like that was something that spoke to me, and like that's kind of the play style I have is aggressive decks. And but I basically never have played a deck that needed fetches or duels, like original duels. And unfortunately, cost is a very very real thing. I mean, I don't want to make it like a finance podcast, but duels are expensive, and especially in Legacy, where blue is a huge deal, you need blue duels and blue fetches, and those are the most expensive in the game.
Correct. Essentially, at least in my lay opinion, you either need to get the blue lands, you need to get City of Traders, or you're going to be playing Burn or Death and Taxes.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with playing those decks. Like they're all great decks, and they can all win pretty well. But if you want to play any of like the mainstays of Legacy, so things like Through the Breach, Delver, any sort of Leovold strategy, Storm, there's
Sneak and Show.
Sneak and Show. You have to have blue duels, and those are just so expensive.
And the main reason why is because you need Force of Will.
Yes, which actually very recently has been reprinted several times. So it's kind of lower than it has been for a while, I think.
You can find them pretty regularly for around 40 to 50 now.
Yeah, that's where I got mine at, was 50 each, and those were the Onslaught ones.
Alliances.
Sorry. Yes, alliances. But
Alrighty.
so besides cost, I think it requires knowing your meta incredibly well. So if you're not, I don't think if you're willing to put in the time to like really study what's going on in your local play group, uh, then it may not be for you. It's definitely not casual in the gameplay. It can be casual in your group, but you know, people aren't super keen about taking things back, and people really, generally if prizes are on the line, they want to play legacy, hardcore. So that's definitely something to take into consideration.
Yeah. So I think you hit the nail on the head. I very rarely play casual legacy. I think the only casual legacy I do play is with you, and that really is just more deck testing for each of us.
Yeah, I mean, we have fun, and like we're not gonna like hardline each other on take backs, but we do keep each other in check and go like, well, you can't do that. And like in the example of that you just said, where I had the two mutavaults, and basically activating them would equalize the board, and you wouldn't be able to attack through me. When you cast it, you know you named Merfolk, or sorry, you named Mutavault,
Mhm.
and I couldn't activate them in response.
Cor- Correct. Actually, I believe where you're getting a little off is I cast it. I asked for responses. You said no responses. It hit the
Yes,
board. I named Mutavault, and you're like, oh crap, I can't activate in response because now the card is active. I should have done it while you were in the cast phase. Again,
that
it's little again, and that's an easy one, but there's just little tweaks like that of what phase you want to play things. You really got to be cognizant of.
and that actually very succinctly describes what I meant by like you have to pay attention. Like and it's kind of common in Magic to go like, oh, shorthand, I counter this thing, right? And when you're in a tournament, you have to go, no, wait, that's on the stack. It didn't get countered. I have responses. You have to make sure to kind of gauge things. But in Legacy, like I know in Standard you can make Standard and Modern, um, mistakes can get made all the time. But in Legacy, every turn means something incredibly important. So if you bypass a mistake, that could be the thing that leads you to a loss, and you'll be able to trace it back to that.
All right. So, how do you feel gameplay differs from other formats, such as standard, modern, popper, commander, etc.?
I think we kind of covered it a little bit in that like the early turns really inform how a game of Legacy goes, and I think it kind of closely from the group that you stated, it kind of most closely mimics Modern, where developing is very important. In Standard, I actually haven't played Standard for quite some time. I know you haven't either. But in Popper, you know, it is important to develop well, but like sometimes things can just turn around. In Commander, developing is not very is important, but it's not like you're not racing to get ahead of people in the first couple turns of the game. You're just playing at your starting pieces, and so I think it's most like Modern, where you need to develop well, or else you're just going to be behind.
One thing I'll add to that as well is that there's no shame in scooping to hide information because legacy players are going to be looking for as much information as they can about your deck and how you're playing it. So if they drop a turn one chalice and it completely shuts your current build of your deck down, and you haven't even played a land yet, there's no shame in scooping up your cards and making them sideboard blind.
One other uh, important or kind of example that I have that we actually in our games just played. So in game two, I was on the play because I lost game one, and I sideboarded in back to basics against Matt's Eldrazi deck. Now, I played an island and he played Curse Catcher, and then he played a land and passed. Then I played another
The Eldrazi
island.
deck runs no basic lands, by the way.
What's that?
The Eldrazi deck runs no basics.
Yes, so Eldrazi in Legacy plays no basics. So I played Island, Curse Catcher. Matt played a land. I think you played Mutavault.
It was a Mutavault or a Soul Land or something. Yeah.
Yeah. So then I played an island, played Silvergo Adept, and drew another basic island. And then he turned 2, he played Sorcerer's Spyglass, again, revealing he saw back to basics in my hand, and he scooped. And not that he couldn't have fought through it, but he basically was taking the information that he had or that he could get from me, and he could better apply that in game 3. Because in game 3, he can Thought Not Seer that out of my hand. Or he
and
can.
I got to be more prepared for it.
Yeah.
Because in that game, I kept a mediocre 7-carder that, in hindsight, I probably should have mulliganed. And it bit me. And as Cody said, maybe I could have come back. But by that point, I would have been so low on life that it would have been highly unlikely. So, Cody, what are your initial impressions of Merfolk and Legacy? What do you think of the deck's strengths and weaknesses?
I think that it has weaknesses against fair decks. Or, sorry, unfair decks. So Sneak and Show, Storm are kind of hard, game 1 matches. You have tools in the sideboard to kind of help against those. And they're not impossible decks to beat, but it definitely is harder to beat decks that are doing things that are super unfair. So in that case, I think it has hard matchups against decks that win fairly consistently. But knowing your meta and knowing how to play against those decks, which I obviously don't have that experience yet, I think you can build up and beat those decks. But I think the deck has pretty enormous stabilizing power. In one of our games, I stabilized pretty well, I think, all things considered. You got me down to 3, and I got into a board that you couldn't attack through. And I mean, you solved that problem, but that just shows that Merfolk can stabilize a losing board and even sometimes power through.
Okay. So Legacy and Modern Merfolk are very similar decks. How do they play similarly, and how do they play differently?
Well, they play similarly in a lot of ways. Like they both have the full set of lords and Silvergill and Curse Catcher. So in the creatures they're very similar, but I think Legacy plays more to it being a tempo deck, which is really what the modern version is. A lot of people think of it as a creature aggro deck, but really it is a tempo deck. Just the Legacy version kind of leans harder into that with Chalice of the Void and running more main deck counter spells like Force of Will and Daze, and other spells like Echoing Truth. And so I just think it's more about sequencing your plays well and knowing what to counter, and then that kind of leads into playing better in Legacy overall.
Well, and the Legacy deck does not play Spreading the Seas.
So one of the reasons you don't play Spreading Seas in Legacy is because, as we said earlier, there's so many blue decks, and they're very reliant on blue mana. So they may fetch out a original duel, so they'll lose 1 life to get a dual land out, and they might be off their other color, but you're not going to take them off blue, which is really the most important color in Legacy. And that doesn't hurt them too bad because they've got a deck full of fetches and other duels that they can just immediately get that. So the marginal upside of us drawing 1 card and having Island Walk are basically gone. We already have Island Walk if they're fetching out like a tropical island or a volcanic island or whatever. And so we're not doing, and we're not slowing them down enough. In Modern, where they're fetching out a shock, we're doing something because we're cutting off their color and they're taking all that damage. But we're not doing that in Legacy, so we don't run uh, seize effects.
Well, also in modern, you don't have daze or force of will. So the slots are better used for good counter spells, whereas modern really doesn't have any good counter spells right now.
Yeah, that's fair.
So what matches do you feel you're favored with Legacy Merfolk? And what matches do you feel are unfavorable? And what matches do you feel are unwinnable?
I kind of went into this a little bit. I think decks like Through the Breach are kind of hard to win. When you're putting in a Lord of Atlantis, and they're putting in Emrakul, it's kind of hard to deal with that. But that's something that, uh, you know, as I've said multiple times, it's about knowing what to counter, knowing when to counter certain things, and but just in general, those unfair decks are kind of harder to deal with. Um, at, as far as fair decks go, I think we're kind of favored against decks like Death and Taxes, and I think Burn is kind of bad against us just because we can we have plenty of counter spells, and even if we have to go to game 2 or game 3, we have more counters in our sideboard. Um, and I think Elves is okay. It's one of those decks that you can just counter the right thing and they can't do anything, or you can bounce the right elf at the right time and they just can't interact with that. So I think there's lots of ways that you can deal with elves and other decks of that deal with creatures a lot.
So what do you think the deck is missing? Is there a card that could be printed that would put the deck over the top? Could the deck ever be top tiered without another deck getting banned out of the format?
I think it could. I think honestly that Merfolk Trickster actually has a lot to do with how Merfolk will do in Legacy. Being able to tap a creature puts us kind of almost at parity with Reanimator and Through the Breach decks, because if we can tap the thing that it put into play, then that shuts off the whole reason that combo existed. And that doesn't make decks like Reanimator completely shut off, but it does stop them for a turn. It stops them the turn that they do it. I mean, I guess except for Emrakul, but it so for if they Through the Breach Grizzlebrand or Chancellor of the Annex, or they reanimate some big dumb beater, then like we can stop that, and that stops those types of combo decks for a turn, and that can give us a chance to interact a little bit better. And I think that it also shuts off lots of things like Deathrite Shaman. It shuts off Delver. It shuts off a lot of cards in the format, or a lot of creatures in the format that could otherwise force unfair decks into a better advantage, and it gives us time to kind of deal with all their shenanigans.
So if someone wanted to get into Legacy, would you recommend the format?
Oh, I would totally recommend the format. It should money not be an issue. That's the biggest thing is, if you've been playing Magic for a long time, then you already have the cards. If you have the money to buy in the format, then I would say it's totally worth it as a 60 card or 75 card format to play. It's very engaging. It's very rewarding. It rewards type play, and I think it's really fun in that way. But it is expensive, so it's kind of hard to recommend it to everybody.
If someone was getting into Legacy, would you recommend Merfolk?
I would say that I would recommend Merfolk if people liked tribal decks, or decks that were not uh, super mainstream. I'd say, like, if you don't want to play one of the super headliner decks, it's a deck that can hold its own, but isn't a tier 1 super high end deck. And Merfolk, I think, relatively compared to most legacy decks, is pretty affordable. So that's another consideration. If you're looking to get into legacy and you only have, it's kind of weird to say you only have $1,500. but for real, like if you have if you said like I have $2,000, what legacy deck should I get? I think Merfolk would do you pretty good.
Well, and the fact that you essentially have modern Merfolk built at the same time.
Yeah, and I did bring that up in our interview with Jay. Uh, was basically like it's basically two decks in one, and I think uh, there's 18 cards in my main board that aren't in 18 card difference, and I think 4 or 6 cards that are different in the sideboards, and a lot of them come from modern. So like dismembers get moved out of the modern deck into the legacy sideboard. Relics move over to the legacy sideboard. There's a lot of overlap.
So, if budget wasn't a hurdle and you were going to a pro tour with $1 million prize, would you sleeve up Merfolk? If not, what would you bring?
I think if I were to sleeve up and tomorrow go to a legacy pro tour,
And
uh,
you had unlimited budget, you could build
unlimited
anything you
budget, I probably wouldn't build Merfolk, or I probably wouldn't take Merfolk. But that's just due to my inexperience with the deck. I think once I get more experience, I'd probably be more comfortable doing a high level tournament with Merfolk. But I think I would probably take soldiers just because of my experience with it. And I know that that's super sideboardy. I guess if I have no budget and I could build anything I wanted, I'd probably bring uh like a Leovold deck of some kind. I really like Leovold. I think it's a fun. I mean it's a fun card for the person playing Leovold, but I don't think it's particularly fun to like bring to FNM or I'm trying to think of the deck. It plays like cards out of exile.
Oh, Mist Griffin or Food
Yeah,
Griffin.
yeah, food chain. Yeah, I might bring food chain. Like that seems like a fun deck to play, but again, that requires lots of duels, and that's something that, unfortunately for me, probably in my lifetime, I won't have the money to to play. But
Yeah,
that's
Food Griffin is a sneaky expensive deck because it runs underground seas, tropical islands, and bayous.
yeah. The land
And
base in
bayous
that.
don't have blue in them, but they're just as expensive as the blue duels.
Yeah, of the blue duels, bayous are definitely the most expensive. I would say with 98% certainty.
Underground Sea is the most expensive. Of the non-blue duels, Bayou is the most expensive.
That's what I said. Of the non-blue duels.
Oh, I thought you said of the blue duels.
No, no, of the blue duels, yeah, no,
This can all
Bayou
be edited
Bayou
out.
doesn't make that list.
This can all be edited out. So Cody, that's these are all the questions I had. Thank you very much. I'm
Thank you for
excited to
having me.
hear you what?
I said thank you for having me.
Oh, of course. But I'm very excited to hear what our fans in the Twitterverse and in the YouTube verse and on the internet have to say. Um, the best part is this is interview one of Cody's legacy adventure. He obviously has a long way to go, and I'd be interested to see in maybe a year or two if his answers to these questions would change with more gameplay, or if they would stay the same. And I will actually ask you out in the Twitter world. Think about some of the questions I asked and how would you answer them? And let us know in the comments.
Yeah, we definitely we know that Merfolk has a definite following and legacy. It's a deck. It's not, like I said, it's not tier one. I'd say maybe it's like tier 2.5 in legacy, tier 3 level.
Around there, yeah.
It's kind of hard with no major legacy tournaments. There really isn't so much of a way to gauge it. It's more
They're
based.
coming back. They're coming back.
Yeah, no, I'm excited. Like I can't like there have been more and more of them, and even these team events where they have a standard modern legacy player. Like those are really cool ways to see legacy decks, get played.
Mhm. Well, and right now, Legacy is probably my favorite format. So I'm very excited that it's starting to really see a comeback. Uh, One thing that I would like to see, and this is something that Legacy's had a problem with for a while, is the top tier decks are so much better than the second tier decks. So Wizards needs to do a better job of managing their ban and restricted list. I guess there's no restricted list in Legacy, but they need to do a little bit better job managing the ban list and maybe try to open up the meta to be a little more diverse. That and I think that's one place where Modern is much better than Legacy. Is you have a much more diverse meta, whereas Legacy you're always going to see Grixis Delver in the top 10 right now, and probably multiple versions of the deck.
And I also want to give a shout out to Terrence Vinson on Facebook. He's in the Merfolk Splash to Victory group. He wanted me to come out to Cincinnati to play with him on his Merfolk team. I apologize. I could have brought Merfolk Legacy, but my wife had to work that weekend, so my kids, I can't leave them, unfortunately. I think it'd be a terrible Lord of the Flies situation, and I don't think my wife would have appreciated that very much. Uh, so I apologize, Terrence. Hopefully, at some point, we can get something together, and I would gladly suit up with Legacy Fish for you.
So thank you guys all for listening. We really appreciate it. We have fun. We joke around. We act semi-unprofessional, probably because we are unprofessional. But we really do appreciate everybody who tunes in every week and the interaction that we get online. It's been a lot of fun. As we stated earlier, if you have a few extra dollars laying around and you could support us on Patreon, we have some really cool things that we want to do. Unfortunately, and Cody and I put in quite a bit of our own money into this to stay up with some of the technology and the branding that we want to do. But we both have young kids and college funds and student loans, and
there's just college ourselves. Like we're paying for college ourselves.
Yeah. So there's only so far the budget can spread. So again, if you just spare $1 a month, just imagine I'm the homeless guy in the corner that's saying with the sign.
We'll podcast for Merfolk.
We'll podcast Merfolk for $1. So if you guys don't mind, that'd be fantastic. We'd really appreciate it. Other than that, subscribing and retweeting is just a great way to help us get out there. And just thank you to everyone. We really appreciate everything.
Yeah, we've been enjoying the interaction on @FishcastMTG on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. It's been really cool to talk to you guys. I should share on Instagram a little bit more, I think. I always say that, and then I
post. What's an Instagram?
It's like Facebook, but you just post pictures, and they don't show up in the same order that you post them, so it's really confusing.
Get off my lawn.
Yeah. And yeah, so thank you, everybody. We will see you all next week.
Yes, guys, thank you. I'm sorry if I was awful being the main interactor with you all this week. I promise I will go back to drinking bourbon and being unprepared next week and just making Cody's life miserable.
Have a good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone.